Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Chen Ming took Cheng Xinghai and floated in the hyperspace for a while, until the civilian passenger ship had completely disappeared from the visible place. Chen Ming's own spaceship slowly flew to Chen Ming's side. As soon as he entered the spaceship, Chen Ming directly tried to unlock the special terminal that he got from Cheng Xinghai. But soon Chen Ming found that he couldn't unlock this thing. It's not that there is a password that can't be cracked, it's simply that it can't be opened. Even his psychic power can't work on it. It seems that he can only take it away and restrict Cheng Xinghai from using this thing, but can't steal the information in it. Chen Ming thought about it. After all, this thing itself is something outside the normal setting. If he can see some important information posted by the other side in the channel, then the other side basically doesn't need to fight. Then Chen Ming directly put away the terminal, and then found an empty independent small room on the spaceship and threw Cheng Xinghai in. After turning Cheng Xinghai's protective clothing into liquid again, Chen Ming also changed her into a pair of lighter handcuffs. At the same time, the structure of the entire room was changed, and there were no exposed sharp objects and metal walls to prevent Cheng Xinghai from taking the opportunity to commit suicide. A living person is definitely more useful than a dead person. During this process, although Cheng Xinghai had been observing quietly, there was no big movement. Even though she was arranged by Chen Ming in this room, she just sat quietly in the corner of the room. She lowered her head and hugged her knees, saying nothing, looking autistic. Only her body seemed to twitch slightly. Chen Ming glanced at her. The armor on her body gradually liquefied and disappeared, and turned to leave the room. However, Chen Ming did not go far, but passed through the one-way transparent window structure similar to the two-story door of the corridor of the previous civilian ship, and continued to observe whether Cheng Xinghai in the room had any movement. After waiting for a while, Cheng Xinghai was still sitting in the corner, but the trembling of her right leg gradually became more and more obvious. Chen Ming thought for a moment and took out the thin steel needle that he had taken from Cheng Xinghai before. In order to prevent the possibility of toxins or something like that, Chen Ming disassembled the steel needle and threw the disassembled materials into the warehouse. He made a new and identical steel needle in his hand and gently stabbed it with his fingertips. The sharp pain in his fingertips reminded Chen Ming that the pain in the simulation was no different from the real one. It was just like the burning sensation in the lungs when smoking. No wonder a bunch of detection equipment had to be installed where he lay when he was in deep consciousness. It would be too embarrassing if he died of pain. Chen Ming glanced at Cheng Xinghai in the room, whose right leg and ankle were unnaturally crooked and looked like he was enduring pain. Then he opened the warehouse on the spaceship panel. He made this spaceship by robbing other spaceships, and some of the things in the warehouse of the spaceship were also moved to the warehouse by him. Chen Ming searched for a while and found a few medicines and 2 splints and put them in front of Cheng Xinghai. Then he arranged tables, chairs, and beds for rest in Cheng Xinghai's room, and also found a set of pillows and quilts from the warehouse that Chen Ming didn't know where they came from. After considering what else the next person would need, Chen Ming set up a TV program projection screen on the wall next to him. Then he directly connected to the local public signal. When a pink piglet appeared on the screen, Chen Ming quickly cut off the screen. Why is there such an ancient program in the simulation? Chen Ming noticed that Cheng Xinghai's arms around his knees were slightly raised, covering his face. He didn't know whether he was laughing or doing something. Chen Ming shook his head. He actually did this because he didn't know much about the arrangement conditions for prisoners of war in this era. He didn't know anything, so he could only follow the standards of the prison he knew. At least put a TV out so that people wouldn't have to stay in this small room for the next month. If Chen Ming was captured and couldn't do anything for a month, it would actually be no different from torture. After arranging these things for Cheng Xinghai, Chen Ming took out his special terminal and asked in the communication channel, "Will injuries such as fractures in the simulation be fatal?" Song Pu immediately asked in the channel, "Are you injured? Treat it, and come back to see a doctor as soon as possible. Even if it is a fracture, if you delay it for too long, it will worsen. You won't know how you died when you die." Got it. Chen Ming put down the terminal and looked at Cheng Xinghai, who didn't want to move at all and didn't want to treat himself at all. He suddenly had a headache. If Cheng Xinghai had been assassinated by him at the beginning, there would not be so many things if she died. But since Chen Ming had successfully captured her alive, it is definitely impossible to kill Cheng Xinghai directly for the sake of saving trouble. But Cheng Xinghai had clearly stated that he wanted to commit suicide before being captured to prevent trouble for his teammates. It should be impossible for Cheng Xinghai to treat him. So Chen Ming picked up the terminal again and wrote a sentence in the input box. Is Bai Quan here? Chen Ming did not send it directly, but waited. At this moment, Bai Quan, who was acting as a referee, couldn't help but smile. He could see the situation of everyone present at any time, and naturally he could also see Chen Ming's actions. But he certainly would not take the initiative to destroy this scene that he was very happy to see. So Bai Quan just said in the communication channel of his psychic friend, who also had the authority to referee, "Not here. Choose to continue watching the fun." Chen Ming waited for a long time but didn't get Bai Quan's response. He sighed slightly. It seemed that he had to deal with this problem himself. Chen Ming walked in front of Cheng Xinghai, half squatted on the ground, picked up the untouched splints and bandages on the ground and the spray for treating bruises and injuries, waved them in front of Cheng Xinghai and asked, "Can you treat it yourself?" Cheng Xinghai raised her head slightly, and her eyes, which were blocked by her hair and made Chen Ming unable to see clearly, stared at Chen Ming's face for a while and shook the handcuffs. Chen Ming thought for a while and untied the handcuffs on her wrists. Cheng Xinghai immediately jumped up. Even if only one leg could move normally, it hardly affected the speed of her movements. In an instant, she punched Chen Ming's temple. Then there was another sound of flesh and metal colliding and a slight sound of bone cracking. Cheng Xinghai's eyes were red, and his right hand twitched unconsciously as he sat back in the corner where he had just squatted. Chen Ming was not a fool. When he uncuffed Cheng Xinghai, he must have been ready to put on another set of power armor. But he did not expect Cheng Xinghai to be so stubborn. He knew that he must be on guard, but he still dared to play like this. Cheng Xinghai's right hand was already stiff and unable to move, and there were large pieces of blood on the back of his hand and knuckles. After personally experiencing how real the pain in the simulation was, Chen Ming sighed and grabbed Cheng Xinghai's hand. Chen Ming had only learned some simple medical skills from the doctor's terminal when he was on Reimu. Although he had learned the blueprints of medical robots and could build them, he could not get the chip with the required medical data input now. So he could only roughly reset the broken bones in Cheng Xinghai's hand and found something that could be used as a splint from the warehouse. However, when doing the last bit of delicate work, the hand structure of the power armor was a bit too rough. Chen Ming glanced at Cheng Xinghai's lowered head, thought about it, and removed the power armor on his body again. This time Cheng Xinghai did not hit Chen Ming, and honestly let Chen Ming put on the splint for her. However, just when Chen Ming finally fixed the splint with a strap, Cheng Xinghai's left hand swung at Chen Ming's temple again. Finally, it was still a punch on the helmet of the power armor. Except for continuing to leave some bruises on her fist and making her eyes gradually moist, it did not play any role. Are you really not afraid of pain? Do you really want to bet that my reaction speed can't keep up with your speed? Chen Ming was also a little helpless at this time. After all, he was a captive, and it was impossible for Cheng Xinghai to really kill himself. Chen Ming tightened the straps that had just been loosened, fixed the splint on the injured hand, and sprayed some medicine on it. Then he grabbed Cheng Xinghai's other hand and continued the steps of applying medicine and splinting just now. After Cheng Xinghai's hand was taken care of, Chen Ming looked at her right leg that had just kicked him in the neck and said, "What's wrong with your foot?" Cheng Xinghai raised her two injured hands, and it was obviously impossible for her to apply medicine or splints. Chen Ming exhaled. "Sorry." He reached out and pulled up the leg of Cheng Xinghai's sweatpants, took off her sneakers and socks, and revealed the white and tender skin on her calves, which did not look like she had been exposed to too much wind and sun. And with these thin arms and legs, it did not look like she could kill Chen Ming with just that kick. But Chen Ming would not be fooled by superficial things. He only believed in Cheng Xinghai's explosive power and speed that he had just experienced in person. And what he saw with his own eyes now was the fracture, bruises, and swelling on the instep and ankle of Cheng Xinghai's slender calf caused by her kick just now, as well as the abnormal limb tilt of about 30 degrees. The force that caused this injury was the strongest strength that Chen Xinghai's seemingly weak body could exert. And it was obvious that if the injury was not treated and continued to worsen, the person would definitely not survive. So Chen Ming built an ice machine on the spacecraft and found ice cubes to temporarily apply ice to Chen Xinghai's ankle. At the same time, he used an X-ray machine to roughly take a picture of her injury. Then Chen Ming directly used the folk method he learned from the doctor's terminal to start, first bending the broken bones back. When Chen Ming held Chen Xinghai's ankle, Chen Xinghai's body trembled subconsciously, and his eyes stayed on Chen Ming's face. In addition to the reaction caused by pain, there are other reasons. Chen Xinghai was thinking back to the past in his mind at this time. After hearing about Chen Ming, she took the initiative to mention to Bai Quan that she wanted to find Chen Ming for a simulated battle. Bai Quan's attitude was completely different from the attitude Bai Quan had when he found any other male close to Chen Xinghai's age in contact with her. Maybe at the first moment her mind was full of defeating Chen Ming, the person who defeated Chen Xinghai. Fortunately, she turned around and mocked Chen Xinghai and did not notice the difference. But later, when Bai Quan took the initiative to send Chen Ming's contact information to her instead of Bai Quan helping to arrange a battle, she completely discovered the problem. The difference is too obvious. Chen Xinghai is 19 years old after all, and her psychic power directly improves intelligence. Many things can be understood with a little thought. Bai Quan's obvious thoughts can be seen at a glance. Combined with the identity background of Chen Xinghai, Chen Ming, and Bai Quan himself, the direction of what Bai Quan wants to see most can also be easily analyzed. Knowing all this is not too surprising for Chen Xinghai. She is half apprentice and half daughter of Bai Quan, the Lieutenant General of the 14th Corps. She is also a psychic and is under the rules of the 14th Corps. Her living environment determines that she will not be able to decide her future like many people who grow up in a normal environment. Her future path is almost predetermined. If everything goes well, she will either rely on psychic power to rise to a high position in the military or die alone. Or she could maintain the current level and find an opportunity to marry a young officer in the 14th Corps who is the same as Bai Quan or slightly worse. She originally had only two paths to choose from. But she was better than others in that her psychic power would never make her a victim of politics. At least she had the ability to make her own choices in a limited number of paths, although she didn't want to choose either of these two options. But if she had to choose one, she would rather choose the latter. As for the former, Chen Xinghai had heard that a lieutenant general had been captured in a certain war zone, and there was also a situation in front of her that Bai Quan's old boss had to ask Bai Quan to find a way out as he gradually lost power due to old age. This feeling of losing power in old age made Chen Xinghai feel uncomfortable, and therefore she didn't value military positions and power too much. As for the latter candidate, Chen Xinghai had never decided. So the appearance of Chen Ming was actually a very normal thing for Chen Xinghai. But she was a little confused about her attitude at this time. Although she was quite resistant to political marriage, she knew that she had no power to change it, so she could only accept it. And Bai Quan had not disrespected Chen Xinghai's opinions for so many years, and had not asked Chen Xinghai to do something she didn't want to do early, and even took the initiative to help her block many people. He gave her plenty of opportunities to choose a suitable marriage partner. But Chen Xinghai had not been able to find a suitable person who could convince her in terms of personal qualities and personal abilities for so many years. Chen Ming was the only person that Bai Quan, her adoptive father, took the initiative to build a relationship with. So Chen Xinghai actually didn't mind having more contact with Chen Ming. I just don't know why when facing Chen Ming. Although Chen Xinghai had no feelings at all and was purely considering from the perspective of political interests, she just couldn't be sure of her own thoughts. Obviously, Chen Xinghai could quickly give an answer to many things as long as she thought about them, and whether it was suitable or not was just a matter of one word from her. Even if she really made it clear what she meant by her opposition, Bai Quan would never force her. But the current situation made it impossible for her to answer this question in the first place. She has been struggling. However, her competitive spirit made her temporarily suppress those extremely complicated problems for her in the past few days, and chose to do the original thing first, inviting Chen Ming to participate in the battle. The battle is over. Maybe there will be an answer. Unexpectedly, This simulated battle has just started for a few hours. At a time when it is almost impossible to suffer losses, she was directly captured by Chen Ming, and there is no possibility of escape. Let her have time to think about these problems again. Just thinking about this kind of problem makes her a little headache. And Chen Ming actually gave her an acceptable feeling at the beginning. Because Chen Ming was the person she wanted to contact after she heard about this person, not someone forced to come. So Cheng Xinghai at least did not dislike Chen Ming, but it seemed that there was nothing more. And she is still not sure about Chen Ming's attitude. No, it's not a question of Chen Ming's attitude, but Chen Ming seems to have no attitude at all. Cheng Xinghai finally found something wrong. She has made some preparations herself, and Bai Quan is obviously here for this. But what about Chen Ming? Chen Ming seems to have no idea in this regard at all. Cheng Xinghai glanced at Chen Ming in front of him again and struggled for a long time in his heart, until Chen Ming was almost finished. Cheng Xinghai didn't think of a suitable answer. Forget it, let it go. Cheng Xinghai found that although her IQ improved after the awakening of psychic power, many things could not come up with an idea that made her feel comfortable just because of her high IQ. At this time, Chen Ming, who had just tied the splint on Cheng Xinghai, didn't expect Cheng Xinghai to think of a bunch of messy things for him. He was just temporarily treating Cheng Xinghai's injuries to prevent the injuries from worsening and dying halfway. If he really treated them, he had to go back to find a serious doctor. There was another problem after returning. Chen Ming could control Cheng Xinghai, but the doctor obviously couldn't. So we have to find a way to keep an eye on it when the time comes. After taking care of the injury on Cheng Xinghai's right leg, Chen Ming stood up and prepared to take out the terminal and contact others. He had everything done. However, Cheng Xinghai suddenly raised his head at this moment and said to Chen Ming, "Thank you." Chen Ming was stunned for a moment, and after confirming that this was not a trap by Cheng Xinghai, he nodded and said, "You're welcome." After saying that, he turned around and left the room, and directly sent a sentence on the terminal, "It's done." This time Cheng Xinghai spoke even faster than Song Pu. "Okay, are you dead?" "No, I caught him alive and I'm on my way back." "Pity." Chen Ming didn't know what Cheng Xinghai was feeling sorry for. But before he complained, Song Pu quickly followed up and said, "You handle your prisoner. My suggestion is to put a TV on her and close the small dark room. After all, this is just a simulated battle, not a real fight to the death. We can't really interrogate the war. By the way, the fracture you mentioned before should be Cheng Xinghai's fracture, not yours, right? Don't leave all the treatment to the NPC, otherwise she is very likely to run away." "I know this." Chen Ming still listened to Song Pu's explanation. After all, he had much more experience in this kind of thing than he did. And he happened to have done this before and had such thoughts. But Chen Ming still has a question to ask. Is Cheng Xinghai a prisoner of any use? Although Chen Ming thought when he captured Cheng Xinghai that the living were more useful than the dead, he really didn't expect the specific uses. Song Pu's answer also surprised Chen Ming. "As far as I know, prisoners should be useless in most cases. As I said just now, this is just a simulation after all, and death is a common occurrence. Everyone knows each other, so we can't really torture and interrogate. Really, the only purpose of the captive is to distract her teammates. We are a team of 5. When anyone in the team dies, our teammates will get a prompt from the terminal. If you take away Cheng Xinghai's terminal, her teammates will be completely unable to contact her and will not be able to learn about her situation. They will only know that she is still alive. The specific effect this can have, it should be just like that. As for using prisoners to threaten teammates," Chen Ming helped Song Pu at the last sentence. "It doesn't seem to make any sense. This is just a simulation after all." At this time, Chen Ming looked back at the room where Cheng Xinghai was imprisoned. Cheng Xinghai was already lying on the bed he had arranged. He covered his eyes with his arms and didn't know what he was thinking. "Then let's take care of it first. Anyway, there are no physiological needs such as eating and sleeping in the simulation. Well, we can officially start this battle after you come back. Having such a big advantage at the beginning, we can let go and do things." Song Pu then said to Chen Ming, "As the supreme leader of the rebels, I can arrange your current status at will. It must be arranged in the most suitable place. So what do you think?" Chen Ming still couldn't think of what he should do. After thinking about it, he could only say, "Let me get in touch with the rebels' warehouse. I remember this. When you come back, I will arrange for you to visit the logistics center system and several industrial colonies. Even if you pass by, don't go there by yourself. The garrison may not know you." "I see." Chen Ming finished speaking, but Song Pu was still thinking. Although Chen Ming seemed to have answered Song Pu's question just now, Song Pu could clearly see that Chen Ming was actually blind now. He had no idea what he should do in the team during this large-scale battle between government forces and rebels. Obviously, he has no experience and is used to doing things alone. So Song Pu simply started to help with arrangements. Putting the right people in the right positions is what people like him should do. As long as this kind of thing is done right, then the rest is just a matter of watching other people's performance. Even a completely inexperienced person in the right position will be more effective than an experienced person in the wrong position. And this is even more true for a person who has no experience at all but is extremely capable. Chen Ming's arrangement requires him to think carefully. Song Pu did not make a decision quickly on how to arrange Chen Ming. Instead, after spending some time with Hong Guanghong and Dong Miao to learn more about logistics and engineering details, I found Chen Ming in the terminal again. "I've seen you rub the destroyer with your hands before. If I give you the materials and time, you should be able to rub the cruiser with your hands, right?" "No problem." Chen Ming had not neglected the research on cruiser technology during this period. Even before he had developed the fake body technology, Chen Ming still had to squeeze out time every day to learn other things besides command technology. Now that he has taken on the task of learning command techniques under his disguise, Chen Ming can devote even more energy to other aspects. With the increase in thinking speed provided by psychic energy and the hive mind network, his learning efficiency has allowed him to now manufacture some mass-produced cruisers, such as the Defender-class cruiser developed by Sindar Company that Chen Ming has in hand. Song Pu nodded secretly and continued to confirm, "What about the large industrial equipment? What about the entire factory?" "Let's put it this way. A spaceship of the same size is more difficult to control than industrial equipment. It is also more difficult for my psychic energy to act on the spacecraft than on most industrial facilities. Besides, before I learn how to build a spaceship, I have to figure out the uses of the tools and so on, and then I can build the spaceship." Chen Ming's meaning is very clear. His mastery of industrial facilities is deeper than his mastery of spaceships. A glint suddenly flashed in Song Pu's eyes, and he said, "We currently control 11 industrial colonies, and more than half of them are industrial colonies related to war and spaceships that were snatched during the battle with the government forces. There are 5 heavy industry colonies related to spaceships, including production industrial facilities for hulls, spacecraft components, spacecraft armor, shipboard weapons, etc. The highest number can currently produce cruisers. At the same time, we also have 2 heavy industry colonies for spacecraft fuel production, and 3 light industrial colonies that mass-produce daily necessities and various daily necessities. These 3 colonies control the people's livelihood in the entire Gallo 4-star region. One of them was originally a light industrial colony that was fully controlled by the government and used to adjust the prices of civilian supplies. Later, you will know after looking at the background story. The remaining 2 light industrial colonies are joint ventures built by some companies related to this area. The last industrial colony is the Integrated Industrial Park and has a quarter-built track industrial facility where many companies have their factories. Other army equipment and industrial production facilities are basically located in other comprehensive colonies. Chen Ming thought about the connection between the string of information Song Pu just said and the question he originally asked, and asked, "Do you want me to build a new colony?" No, expansion is the top priority. Building a new colony is 100 times more difficult than expanding the original colony. Maybe you didn't look at the terminal just now, but the engineer and I have almost talked about it. Our main direction next is to try to expand these industrial colonies with our war potential. These are what the engineer is busy with now. Chen Ming asked again. He needs to come to more than a dozen industrial colonies? Is 1 month enough? Are you doubting the speed of the engineers or the speed of construction? Chen Ming said bluntly, a little bit of both. Song Pu immediately explained for Hong. You can rest assured about the efficiency of the engineer's work. Under the premise that everything has a template, planning can be very fast with his ability. What we have to do is not to innovate, but to walk the path that has been taken by our predecessors again. And there are actually only 7 industrial colonies that we need to expand. In the simulation, he is not the only one who can do things. There are so many rebel engineers. As for the speed of construction, nowadays, all industrial equipment is being modularized and simplified. As long as there is space and enough materials, at most half a month will be enough for us to double the size of those war industrial colonies. Of course, the premise is that we need to invest all our production capacity. Although Song Pu limited the conditions, Chen Ming still asked with some uncertainty, "Is it so exaggerated?" Of course there is, because this is a simulation and we are not thinking about the future. Under the premise of directly abandoning the original rebels to protect people's livelihood, completely turning the gallows, 4-star area we occupy to wartime industrialization can definitely ensure that the expansion efficiency and production efficiency are both improved. For us, the time limit for this simulation is only more than 1 month. We have to find ways to survive in just 1 month, and even fight back against the government forces. No matter what means we use, winning is the most important thing. And within a month, the negative effects of the comprehensive industrial transformation will not appear so quickly. The overall economic level of the entire sector may even rise for a short period of time within a certain period of time. So that's the opportunity we have to take and what we have to do. And what's more important is your existence. It's your exact words that controlling a spaceship is more difficult than controlling industrial equipment. Everything I just said is based purely on normal planning. If you help me, the expansion efficiency will be even higher. Your presence allows us not only to resist attacks by government forces, but also serves as our trump card to fight back against government forces. Chen Ming didn't expect Song Pu to say that and asked, "Do you really believe in my ability?" Dong Miao suddenly interjected at this time and said, "I remember a few hours ago you seemed to have just told us to believe you. We believed you, and you did what you said. We don't believe you anymore." Question. That's what you said. Can I make a few requests to the engineer? When Chen Ming just asked this question, Hong said in the terminal, "I'm watching." When planning the expansion of a colony, try to plan the direction of expansion continuously rather than creating new expansions independently. What's the meaning? Chen Ming explained, for example, if a spacecraft's armor plate manufacturing factory needs to be expanded, then there are 2 options. You can choose to build a new, identical factory, or you can choose to install a new production line based on the original factory. I know that under normal circumstances, we must choose to install additional production lines, but when different industrial facilities are expanded, it is certainly impossible to completely expand new production lines. And different industrial facilities also require different supporting facilities, and these supporting facilities should also have this problem. I hope that when you plan the expansion blueprint, you will try to expand on the original colonial industrial facilities instead of building new factories. Hong considered Chen Ming's request for a while and said, "It can be done, but it will increase the workload and cause the final blueprint to be released later. But it's good for when I use my powers on industrial equipment." Chen Ming did not explain the specific advantages of it. After all, it was a hidden effect that was relatively invisible to his psychic powers. That is, when he currently uses transformation and manufacturing to achieve similar effects, the mental energy consumed in manufacturing is more than 3 times that of transformation. It used to be 5 times. With Chen Ming's proficient use of psychic energy, the consumption of mental power is gradually decreasing. But in general, the 3 times the consumption is still exaggerated. So when it is obvious that psychic energy needs to be used on a large scale, it is good to save a little mental energy. This time no one in the communication channel questioned Chen Ming, and Hong quickly agreed after Chen Ming said this. "Okay, no problem. Sorry to bother you." After Chen Ming thanked him, he did not continue to ask about the planning of industrial facilities. He turned to Song Pu and said, "Speaking of which, since we have survived the siege by the government troops for a month, we have survived in the face of a higher-level siege. Additional targets, Are there similar conditions for the government forces? Chen Ming seems to have not told you a lot of things. And the fact that you raised this question is probably because you thought of what I just said, right? As you might imagine, government forces also have similar restrictions. Even if they destroy us, they must ensure that most of the galaxies in the one-third of the star field that is the battlefield have sufficient stability. Otherwise, the next rebellion will break out again soon, and this time the government forces will not have the ability to suppress the situation. Government forces will follow in our footsteps. In the end, it will be the same as when we were completely wiped out during the encirclement and suppression. We can only judge a draw. Chen Ming said subconsciously. It feels like they are more relaxed. Songpu immediately denied Chen Ming's idea and said, actually, the difficulty is about the same, but the conditions and restrictions are different, which gives you this illusion. Is it really easy for a government that has led to rebellions due to internal corruption and local policies to oppress civilians to bring stability to these areas? Can ordinary civilians live in peace? Chen Ming thought for a moment and said, yes. So logistics and engineers are very important when choosing teammates in such a large-scale battle. Whether it's the reconstruction planning of industrial facilities or post-war reconstruction and other things, it requires dedicated people to do it, and no one can avoid it. If we were assigned to the government forces side, we would have had these headaches. Simulation is not very friendly and provides a group of engineers who have our best interests at heart. After all, our possibility of winning conflicts with the thoughts of the NPC in the simulation to a certain extent. Chen Ming suddenly lost track of Song Pu's thinking and asked, what is this statement? For example, the goal of the rebels is definitely to liberate the local people from the oppression of the government forces and give them a future. But look at what we are doing. Transforming industrial facilities to exploit the river, exploiting important mineral deposits without restrictions, and increasing the labor tasks of those engaged in industrial production institutions. Does it seem to be consistent with the rebels' goal of liberating civilians? Chen Ming carefully thought about what Song Pu said and the various ideas he mentioned before, and said, it's true. Then if you look at the government forces, the goal of the government forces in the background is definitely to wipe out the rebels as quickly as possible. It doesn't matter if they use up all the resources to catch fish. They themselves are the most important, even if they are fully aware of the consequences if they continue like this. But for the 5 people on the opposite side, they must not be able to catch everything. Otherwise, if the living conditions of ordinary civilians do not improve after the rebels are wiped out, but become worse, the next rebellion will end their chances of winning. Song Pu concluded, this is actually a problem that both sides cannot avoid, a problem where all the pressure is on the rear. This is why large-scale battles must involve the cooperation of multiple people and must have specialized logistics. We must have enough industrial power to support multiple consecutive large-scale battles, and the other side must have enough logistics to ensure post-war reconstruction and the construction of a new rule that can calm the anger of the people. What we need to do is to find a balance, or simply break this balance completely. Of course, the latter is more difficult. You can let NPCs assist and guide them to do things, but you can never let them do things on their own. This may lead to the opposite of what we want. Chen Ming suddenly had another question at this time. The engineer should not be doing the engineering task he is doing now alone, right? There should also be assistance from those rebel engineers. Will there be any problems? It depends on my arrangement. I will control the overall situation and make the overall situation lean towards us. Let us make it seem that there is a reasonable reason for our exhausting efforts, and then you just need to let go and do it. Chen Ming finally realized at this time that the background of this simulation and the identity relationship between them involved were really complicated. But it was still understandable. It was that he still had one thing about the background that he wanted to clarify. Before the simulation started, Bai Quan told him that this simulation might involve the battleship. Does the Gallo Star region currently have a giant dock for producing battleships? Song Pu replied, yes, it's the 14th Corps branch where you are now, the original Gallo 2-star zone military base. The location there is good, so the only giant dock in the Gallo Star region was built there. The government army in the background is quite corrupt, So the giant dock must be abandoned, and the other side must be repairing it now. Chen Ming immediately asked a question in his mind. Even if the giant dock is repaired, something of the size of a battleship should not be built in a month, right? A new one will definitely not be built, but if I remember correctly, there should be a battleship parked in the giant dock. As long as the giant dock is repaired and the battleship is overhauled, it won't take long to go directly to the battlefield. I will definitely not let them drive the battleship out, don't worry. Chen Ming actually wanted to ask if it was possible for him to sneak over and control the giant dock. But after thinking about the premise that the other side must know the existence of his psychic power and the risks of doing so, Chen Ming felt that it was better not to do such things. At least when the situation was very favorable, he must not take the initiative to give opportunities. What should we do next? Counterattack or take the initiative to attack? Song Pu had already prepared a plan in his mind and quickly said, "The pressure of attack is on the opponent. We don't need to attack. What we need to do is to develop and try to expand our military strength before the 1-month deadline. Do a good job of defense in this process to prevent the opponent from using any decapitation tactics, and then consider destroying the opponent's action plan. That's all." I understand. After learning about Song Pu's overall plan, Chen Ming did not continue to speak in the terminal. At this moment, his spaceship was very close to the location of the rebel headquarters in the hyperspace jump. After this jump, he can reach the destination directly. Song Pu had received the information that Chen Ming was about to arrive and arranged a green channel for Chen Ming in advance, waiting for Chen Ming to arrive. However, just when Chen Ming's spaceship entered the normal universe environment from the hyperspace, Song Pu suddenly heard the sound of the invasion alarm being sounded. Song Pu frowned and contacted Chen Ming immediately, asking Chen Ming to stay where he was, and quickly found the relevant person in charge through the rebels' internal network. As soon as the communication was connected, Song Pu heard the other end's obviously anxious movement. The person in charge also immediately apologized to Song Pu. "I'm very sorry, leader. Someone in our group activated the alarm on his own initiative, causing several civilian spacecraft to be accidentally damaged." Spy. Yes. It's normal to have spies, and he also has spies in his hands on the government side. But this spy was so obvious and exposed before it had any effect. What does it mean? Song Pu was a little confused, but he still said to the person in charge in the communication, "Compensate the civilians as soon as possible, get their families forgiveness, and don't let anyone catch you in this matter." Yes. After ending the communication, Song Pu contacted Chen Ming and said, "There is a small problem. Continue to land." Chen Ming, who had been waiting for a while, asked curiously, "What's the problem?" "Just a spy." "Okay." After getting this answer, Chen Ming lost interest in asking questions and said, "I'll come to you later." Before getting off the ship, Chen Ming came to the room where Cheng Xinghai was imprisoned again and said to Cheng Xinghai, who was lying on the bed doing nothing, "We are here. It's time to go." As he said this, he made a wheelchair beside him and motioned Cheng Xinghai to sit on it. Cheng Xinghai slowly moved to the wheelchair, raised his head and asked Chen Ming, "Where are we going?" "Go to the hospital first, then go see people." Cheng Xinghai suddenly seemed a little nervous and asked again, "Cheng Xinghai? He's not here." Cheng Xinghai looked relieved. Not long after, Chen Ming pushed Cheng Xinghai to the hospital attached to the rebel headquarters. The doctor had several scars on his head, and he looked like he had been through a lot. He didn't ask what the injury was. After a simple look, he sent a medical robot to deal with it. The robot removed the splint that Chen Ming had made, took a new X-ray, and treated the injury again with a more professional method. Finally, he gave a suggestion to rest and stay in the hospital and disappeared in the hospital corridor. Chen Ming immediately chose to take out the terminal and asked in the communication channel, "Is there a hospital specifically for prisoners?" Song Pu was still the first to say to Chen Ming, "Yes, there is, but I don't think Cheng Xinghai can be left alone in her condition. It is recommended that you take Cheng Xinghai with you. Your psychic power can monitor her well. If you are worried that Cheng Xinghai will die on the way due to serious injuries, I can send you a doctor or a medical robot to take care of her injuries. And I have prepared a cruiser for you. It should be no problem for you to modify it yourself and take one person." Chen Ming frowned and thought for a while, and replied on the terminal, "It's not impossible. Okay, remember we have to try to hide Qing Xinghai's existence and not let too many people know her location." "Why?" "Because I have an idea. I will arrange a substitute for Chang Xinghai to go to the front line and arrange her to be next to the general, and spread this news and take the initiative to act as bait to lure the other party into the trap. Given the general's character and his relationship with Chang Xinghai, I think it is normal for him to do such a thing. It depends on whether the other party will be fooled." Dong Miao, who had been silent all the time, suddenly interrupted at this time. "You just said that prisoners are useless." Song Pu said bluntly, "Because I didn't think of it just now, and it will be useful if I think of it." This reason was so legitimate that Chen Ming didn't know what to say. At this time, Chang Xinghai, who was sitting in a wheelchair next to Chen Ming, suddenly asked Chen Ming, "Are you going to kill me once and for all?" Chen Ming's frown just now seemed a little obvious. But Chen Ming didn't have such an idea. If Cheng Xinghai died now, Song Pu's arrangement would be wasted, so Chen Ming replied, "That's not the case. You can at least distract your teammates if you are alive. Killing you will not do any good. What do you want to do?" "I can't tell you this." Chen Ming was not stupid enough to tell Cheng Xinghai all the plans, even though Cheng Xinghai was now completely restricted by him. But in Chen Ming's impression, there are still many villains in movies and TV series who like to reveal their plans in advance before things are completely over, so he will never make such a mistake. "By the way, I'll give you something." Chen Ming's hand approached Chang Xinghai's wrist, and the metal liquid flowing from his palm gradually formed a light wristband on her wrist. Chang Xinghai raised her hand and put it in front of her eyes to take a closer look. It seemed to be just a wristband. Chang Xinghai looked at the wristband on his wrist, and at the same time noticed a similar thing on Chen Ming's wrist and asked, "What is the use of this thing?" "The extension of my spiritual power should have all the effects you can think of. Are you using this to limit me?" Chen Ming nodded, reached out to the handle of the wheelchair and said, "Okay, it's time to go." Chang Xinghai waved his right wrist slightly and said, "Didn't you put restrictions on me? If you don't throw me into prison or find a place to lock me up, where else can I go? Even with this thing, I don't think it's safe. After all, you are a psychic. It would be too dangerous to let you out alone. I have to keep an eye on you." Chang Xinghai asked curiously, "I'm just a brain-enhanced psyker. Why do you think I can run away with my hands and feet broken?" An image of Chang Xinghai almost kicking him to death on a civilian passenger ship flashed through Chen Ming's mind, and he said casually, "Then I'm just a psyker who can make the spacecraft autopilot and have some maintenance skills." And I heard a saying. What words? When you understand that auxiliary psychers are not without combat effectiveness, you are just getting started with psychers. Your physical fitness shouldn't just be achieved through exercise, right? The enhanced brain controls the body to make some breakthroughs, and it's normal to have extraordinary movements. Chang Xinghai blinked, looked at Chen Ming's face, and then at the wristband on his hand, but said nothing. Chen Ming didn't notice Chang Xinghai's expression. He just pushed Chang Xinghai off the spaceship, went to the rebel headquarters to meet Song Pu. After all, you can only enter text in the terminal, so I can only talk about it roughly. If possible, it would be better to meet in person and then say yes. When Chen Ming pushed open the door of Song Pu's office, Song Pu glanced at Chang Xinghai in the wheelchair and then at Chen Ming. Without saying a word, he continued to operate on the computer in front of him. Soon a three-dimensional projection appeared in front of his desk. What is displayed is the star map of the Gallo 4-star area, the area actually controlled by the rebels. On this star map, the coordinates of about 20 galaxies in total are specially marked. And there is a line on the star map starting from the rebel headquarters, where Chen Ming is now, connecting all the more than 20 galaxies. Song Pu walked out from behind his desk and motioned for Chen Ming to take a closer look at the star map. At the same time, he said, "I have already planned a specific course of action for you. These connecting points are the locations of our industrial colonies and important logistics centers. As long as you follow this line, you can almost touch these places. Everything you need in the colony will be in your hands along the way." Chen Ming stood next to the three-dimensional imaging and had a panoramic view of the entire Gallo 4-star field, and then said to Sogu, Actually, with a little trick, I can go to these places without even having to go there myself. But it's okay to go there. I feel that rather than using other things to help, it's really not as efficient as going there myself. Songpu knew Chen Ming, and naturally knew what the little trick Chen Ming mentioned was, so he really thought about it before he proposed to Chen Ming the plan to have Chen Ming go there in person. I have prepared a cruiser for you at the port. Chen Ming recalled that when he landed, there seemed to be a ruler parked at the port. A ship like the ruler is acceptable to Chen Ming, but he still wants to try and ask, is there any Stardust? The Stardust class. This thing has not been developed at this point in the simulation. It will be another year. Okay, then let's be the ruler. Songpu nodded slightly and continued. If you pass by the general later, you can go to him. It is best for all our fleets to pass through your hands. No problem. Although the number of spaceships Chen Ming can currently control is only 7 cruisers. But these 7 cruisers are the upper limit for him to have full control over the spacecraft and control it in real time. If only spiritual energy was used to maintain contact, the number would be much greater. It was the upper limit of the number of spacecraft controls that could actually be maintained. He really didn't know yet. Therefore, Chen Ming is not worried that he will not have enough mental strength to control those spaceships when the time comes. But Chen Ming still has a question. Where is the fleet here? Chen Ming did not see that Songpu had any intention of letting him control the fleet at the headquarters. Songpu explained, the headquarters fleet is not in a hurry for the time being, because the headquarters fleet itself will only be mobilized when the situation on the front line is critical. It is better for you to control the ones here than to control the ones elsewhere first. And controlling an entire fleet should consume a lot of your mental energy, right? It's best to use your mental energy on industrial facilities now. I see. Chen Ming said calmly, for me, the mental energy consumption is actually not bad, but it's okay. I have no objection. I will follow your plan. Songpu was very happy to see that Chen Ming had made a decision that was more in line with the interests of the current team. He said with a smile, okay, how many other boats do you need? As your escort fleet. There's no need for small boats. One big boat is more suitable for me. For Chen Ming, small boats can only be cannon fodder. If he really fights with others, the main output will definitely be the cruiser. However, if there are small boats as cannon fodder, Chen Ming may be able to win the game more easily without them. Songpu had no objection to this. As a psychic, Chen Ming naturally knew what kind of fleet size was more suitable for him. After Chen Ming finished speaking, he received the star map file sent by Songpu on his personal terminal, calculated the distance and the efficiency of the jump, and asked Songpu, when can we start? Anytime. The sooner the better. Chen Ming thought for a while and said, then I can leave today. If I go fast, I can go through all these places in one day. Songpu immediately dissuaded him when he heard the exaggerated time. This is a bit too fast. The time the engineer spent on the blueprint is not as efficient as yours. Take your time and do it according to the normal hyperspace navigation time. This is the route planned by the engineer. It must be a speed that can match his work speed. If it is too fast, you can only stay there and do nothing. Chen Ming felt that Songpu's understanding of his psychic power was not accurate, but he did not say much about psychic power. Anyway, these things that can be seen with the naked eye will definitely be slowly adjusted later. But there was one thing he still had to say. Will it take 5 days to complete? Isn't it a bit slow? Isn't the time that the industrial buildings can actually be used after the expansion a bit too short? I can actually jump over there by myself and run all the places once. Songpu suddenly felt that Chen Ming seemed a little too greedy and said, then each industrial colony will have at least half a month of full production time. Half a month at least double production capacity is already a very ideal situation. My original plan was based on this. You don't have to worry too much about time issues. Also, although your idea is good, how will this burden your mental power? And I remember that the simulation equipment for mental power simulation is not perfect enough. Is it really okay for you to do this? Chen Ming said confidently, if there are auxiliary tools, although it does consume some of my mental power, but I think it's acceptable. My mental power recovery speed is also very good. As for the problem of mental power in the simulation, I have already told the referee that I am very clear about my mental power situation. I will stop using psychic power by myself when it reaches the upper limit. This is just a simulation. I don't need to cheat. Seeing this, Song-pu stopped making suggestions. Then do as you say, but try to go slower in the first 2 days. The speed of engineers producing blueprints should not be that fast. No problem. Tell me when you can speed up. I can change the speed at any time, and the speed of engineers working must be faster than me. Well, I will arrange it for you. Song-pu said as he walked to Chen Ming and patted his shoulder and said, "That's it. Our industry depends on you and the engineers. Don't worry." After Chen Ming finished speaking, his eyes suddenly swept over Chang Xinghai, who was doing nothing next to him. In Chang Xinghai's confused eyes, Chen Ming suddenly said to Song-pu, "There is something I need to confirm. How much do you know about my psychic power? How much do you think the other party knows about my psychic power? What do you know about your psychic power?" As for me, I don't say much. You told me a lot of information yourself. According to the protection of your information by Lieutenant General Bai, the most you can get from the normal means of obtaining information is the basic effect of your psychic power. I only know the further derivative effects if you tell me. Or let's put it this way. Many people know that you and Lieutenant General Bai have made a big move on Yu Hui's territory, but no one knows how you did it. But she may not be. Chen Ming looked at Chang Xinghai again. In fact, according to Chang Xinghai's performance in the last simulated battle with him, Bai Quan did not take the initiative to tell Chang Xinghai about his psychic power. And since Bai Quan was the referee of this large-scale simulated battle, Chang Xinghai must have told Bai Quan about it in advance. In a multi-to-many situation, Bai Quan should not reveal his information. So if Chang Xinghai hadn't investigated him carefully, she might have known even less than her teammates. At most, she knew the same as her teammates. When Chen Ming looked at her, Chang Xinghai showed an expression that she knew nothing. Although Song-pu had some doubts, Chen Ming knew that she probably didn't know much. So Chen Ming shook his head slightly at Song-pu and said, "It's okay." Song-pu didn't say much. After returning to his desk, he asked Chen Ming, "When do you want to leave?" "About an hour or two. I checked some information I was interested in on the way here. The simulation background seems to be very close to reality. I found that there seem to be several research institutes that originally belonged to the military of the Star Zone. And because the rebels originated from Gallo, 4, the people in this Star Zone seem to be very normal, not corrupted, and the research institutes are still operating normally." Song-pu didn't expect that Chen Ming was still paying attention to this in the simulation, and said with a little embarrassment, "It takes a long time for the research institute to produce results, so I didn't pay much attention and just let them do their own thing. But I can give you a pass if you want to go to these places. Just get me an identity. There are several research institutes I want to go to. It should be a bit troublesome to get them one by one." "Okay, wait for me a moment." About 10 minutes later, Song-pu raised his head and said to Chen Ming, "It's done. Just take out the ID card wherever you want to go." After speaking, he pointed to a corner of the office, where there was a door that looked like it only led to other rooms. However, Song-pu's eyes quickly glanced at Chang Xinghai next to Chen Ming and said, "If you want to leave, just go this way." It seemed that the substitute Song-pu mentioned before had started to move. Chen Ming needs to cooperate to complete the plan. Of course, Chen Ming would have no objection. After leaving a secret passage in the rebel headquarters and taking some time to visit a few laboratories, Chen Ming returned to the port again. After doing what he needed to do, he came to the ruler who was docked alone at the headquarters port. This Dominator-class ship looks a bit old, but it has obviously been maintained very meticulously. Chen Ming reached out and touched the thick and cold armor of the ruler, and the cruiser immediately came under his control. All the data on the spacecraft was placed in front of Chen Ming. There was nothing on the cruiser except a quite sufficient supply of supplies and some auxiliary robots, which perfectly met Chen Ming's needs. Chen Ming suddenly turned his head and glanced at Chang Xinghai. The autistic look on her face seemed to have recovered a lot. When she noticed that Chen Ming was looking at her, she immediately said, "Why are you looking at me? You can't really want to leave me here watching TV since my legs were broken by you, right?" Chen Ming corrected. "You kicked your leg off yourself, and I originally planned to take you away with me." "Oh, Then why are you looking at me? And you took me to Songpu. I'm looking at you because I'm thinking about where to place you. As for taking you to Songpu, it's because I think if I leave you in the hospital, I think you're likely to run away or simply find an opportunity to commit suicide. Is that so? I thought you were planning to use me to carry out some plan. Chen Ming didn't reply, and there was no change in his expression. Anyway, any attitude would not affect Cheng Xinghai's speculation. The more he said, the more likely he would be wrong. Gone. Chen Ming pushed Cheng Xinghai onto the cruiser and arranged a separate cell for her. A few minutes later, the spacecraft took off. Chen Ming's first stop was a logistics center not far from the rebel headquarters. This place is located in a location where many hyperspace channels intersect. It has a superior geographical location and is a good distribution center for supplies. A considerable amount of military supplies are also distributed here, and a lot of civilian supplies also need to pass through this place. There are clustered warehouses here, which are very convenient to control together. It won't be like those integrated colonies, which are basically block-shaped. And because of integration, the area of each region may be larger than an entire specialized colony. In addition, there are different types of warehouses in different areas, and it takes a lot of time to control them. Therefore, there is no comprehensive colony on Chen Ming's itinerary. But this time, with Song Pu's advance arrangements, Chen Ming successfully docked at the destination planet without any accidents and stayed in a space station in the orbit of the planet. When he was doing business, Chen Ming didn't intend to cause trouble and got off the spacecraft alone. Soon someone came to guide Chen Ming to the colony on the surface of the planet and took him to different material warehouses. Although this guidance is almost the same as no guidance, after all, Chen Ming can tell where the warehouse is. When passing by the warehouse, he basically touches every warehouse. It was when he was doing this that he had a question. This is a logistics center. If I use the materials in the warehouse here, wouldn't there be a shortage of materials in some places? And some warehouses look like they are not the warehouses of our rebels, but the warehouses of companies doing business here. Song Pu's answer was soon waiting on the terminal. Small-scale loss of military supplies is nothing. These supplies will basically have a certain margin when preparing. If materials are to be used on a large scale, or if they are used in the colonies, you can access the materials prepared for the colonies in advance. If there is an emergency that requires materials, it must be in a place that is more important than the original destination of these materials. That's nothing. So just use it whatever you want. As for those companies, let's not talk about whether they can discover the lack of materials in the warehouse at the first time. Even if they find out, they report it, conduct monitoring and inspections, and finally find that the supplies disappear out of thin air, and then report to me along the way, and finally find you. Do you think 1 month is enough? Dong Miao suddenly said at this time. By then we will have already picked up our pants and left. Song Pu was silent for a few seconds and said, "What you say is rough, but your reasoning is not rough." At this moment, Chen Ming suddenly felt that Dong Miao, who was in charge of logistics, was very skilled in doing this kind of thing. But he didn't care too much. After all, he was a teammate. Soon, Chen Ming walked through the storage area of the entire logistics center. After controlling the last warehouse, Chen Ming also had a rough estimate of his current mental power consumption. It can only be said that it is very little. After all, warehouses are very basic buildings, not complicated at all, and there is no cutting-edge technology. The difficulty of controlling them is almost zero. After confirming that his mental power is not exceeded, Chen Ming returned to the cruiser again. From the time he got off the spaceship to now, it took a total of more than 2 hours. The time spent is more than Chen Ming imagined. Originally, Chen Ming thought that controlling these things should be very fast. But if it is based on the current efficiency, he even feels that even if he simply passes by these colonies and logistics centers, it will take 2 or 3 days to control warehouses and industrial facilities. If he does something else and needs to wait for his mental power to recover, it may take longer. But it's okay. At least it's faster than Song Pu originally expected, and if it's a little slower, he can cooperate with his teammates. Chen Ming thought about it and simply followed the time and efficiency that Song Pu said, spending 5 days to go all the way and slow down his pace. Chen Ming has never been a stubborn person. He has always been doing things to correct his own problems, and learn from others' good points. Song Pu was directly assigned to the position of the leader of the rebels, and he definitely has a lot of things to learn from him, at least in large-scale planning. Chen Ming walked up to the ruler while thinking about Song Pu's way of doing things. Just when he got on the boat, he suddenly heard a dong-dong-dong sound not too far from the entrance. It was the sound coming from Cheng Xinghai's room. Chen Ming walked over and found that Cheng Xinghai was leaning against the door in the room, knocking hard on the soft wall with the back of one hand, barely making a sound to attract Chen Ming's attention. At this moment, the expression on Cheng Xinghai's face seemed to have lost the previous depression. Chen Ming immediately opened the door and asked, "What's wrong?" Cheng Xinghai leaned against the wall, tilted his head and looked at Chen Ming and said, "What did you do just now?" "Working." "Why didn't you take me with you?" "Because you are a prisoner." That makes sense. There is no way to refute it. But for Cheng Xinghai, she didn't want to stay on the boat any longer. She had just completely thrown away the things in her mind that she didn't want to think about for the time being. At the same time, she also temporarily put aside the frustration of being captured by Chen Ming as soon as she came up and returned to her usual appearance. As a result, she has nothing to do now. She was locked in the cell for more than 2 hours in boredom, and the idea she just got rid of came back to her mind. She couldn't run away, and she wanted to commit suicide, but the whole room was limp, and she couldn't do it at all. So Cheng Xinghai felt that she couldn't go on like this. Even if she couldn't run away, she had to do something, even if it was just to test Chen Ming's attitude. Maybe she could find some opportunities to escape through what Chen Ming said. Or use the way of building relationships. Think of a way. At least let Chen Ming take her with him when he gets off the ship next time. "Chen Ming, let me ask you something. What is the specific relationship between you and Uncle Bai?" Although Chen Ming was very confused about why Cheng Xinghai suddenly asked this, he still replied, "We should be considered friends." "Is that so? I heard that you had cooperated during the Yuhui operation, and you seem to have conflicts earlier." Chen Ming could treat the first half of the sentence as Cheng Xinghai asking casually after listening to what Song Pu said, but the second half was something that only Bai Quan knew and could not be told to outsiders. After all, this was actually a scandal of the 14th Corps. So Chen Ming didn't answer directly, but just said, "This is more complicated." Cheng Xinghai still said persistently, "Tell me about it. I'm a prisoner and can't do anything. At least let me not be so bored. Besides, this is something outside of this battle. It doesn't matter if you talk about it." Cheng Xinghai stretched out 2 fingers that could barely move and pulled the corner of Chen Ming's coat, looking pitiful. Chen Ming had never been treated like this before. After pulling the clothes twice without opening, he sighed and said, "Okay." After leaving the logistics center, Chen Ming immediately set out on the road to the second target location. However, this time Chen Ming did not use hyperspace jump or ordinary jump system to go there directly, but flew slowly in hyperspace. While waiting for Hong Guanghong to send the blueprint, he also waited for the mental power consumed by controlling the logistics center warehouse just now to recover. Chen Ming's destination this time is an industrial colony planet. You can view various data of the destination planet and the general appearance of the destination planet on the star map. When Chen Ming clicked on the corresponding position on the star map, a planet surrounded by satellites appeared in front of Chen Ming. However, he was not going to that planet, but the seemingly barren satellite that revolved around this planet. The industrial colony on this satellite mainly produces the basic hull of the spacecraft and the supporting basic components of various parts of the hull, and also undertakes the task of developing mineral resources on some planets. However, Chen Ming does not need to worry about the development of mineral resources, and the focus of the colony itself is still on industrial production. Mineral resources are just some extras, and they are carried out by some small branches outside the main colony, which is similar to what Chen Ming had seen in Yuhui's industrial colony. It is really unnecessary for Chen Ming to run to such a scattered and small place one by one. Just when Chen Ming was checking the information of the target planet, it had been a while since he left the last logistics center. And Hong Guanghong suddenly sent the planning blueprint of Chen Ming's target industrial colony. And this blueprint also complies with Chen Ming's requirements. It can almost be said that it is a pure expansion in design. It is expanded on the basis of the original industrial facilities, and only a few buildings need to be built independently. Let Chen Ming not worry about anything and just do it directly. However, he did not do it directly, but spent some time to seriously study the logic and planning of the design in this blueprint. Chen Ming certainly understands the overall content, but the things hidden behind this content are worth his in-depth study. Although this special design of pure expansion is a requirement proposed by Chen Ming himself has never done anything similar. Therefore, under the premise of meeting the original requirements, the new design plan made according to the new restrictions is very special. Chen Ming took a casual look and felt that this blueprint contains some special design techniques. And this blueprint also has obvious traces of military technology. It is very similar to what Chen Ming learned from the basic technology of cruisers given by Baiquan before. Hong Guanghong is a student who is about to graduate from the engineering major of a military academy. Although Chen Ming has graduated for many years, his technical level has also increased by leaps and bounds during this period. But in terms of the professionalism and advancement of technology, as well as some special military design techniques, to be honest, he can't compare with Hong Guanghong. After all, he didn't get the military technology from Baiquan some time ago for a long time, only 2 or 3 months. It always takes time to learn from scratch. How can it be better than a talent who has been studying this for 3 or 4 years? However, if Chen Ming can learn based on the experience of others and learn on the shoulders of others, the difficulty will be different. And he doesn't need to worry that learning this thing will cause him to bring other people's colors when using various technologies. His technical skills have already taken shape, and what he has learned now are all new branches derived from his main stem, which will only enhance his own abilities without affecting his skills. For these reasons, when Chen Ming got the blueprint, he did not rush to jump to the destination to build things as soon as possible, but simply started studying on the spot. And this is also a rare opportunity. The deep consciousness penetration of the simulation equipment of the 14th Corps gave him a super high thinking acceleration rate. At the same time, there was a design blueprint that reflected the level of prospective graduates of the military academy engineering major in front of him. Anyone with a little idea and a little ambition knows what to do. Especially on the main body side, Chen Ming has overdrawn some of his mental power to learn new things at several times the thinking speed after attenuation. Then the prosthesis can also learn with dozens of times the thinking speed increase of more than 10 hours, so why not learn? The dozens of times the thinking increase can extend more than 10 hours to a month, and there is no need to rest, even if most of the time needs to be used for the simulation of the battle itself. If the remaining time is not used to study, it will be a complete waste. It was unknown how long it had passed after Chen Ming immersed himself in learning. Chen Ming's special terminal suddenly vibrated. Song Pu said to Chen Ming on the communication frequency, "I received a message that a ruler-class cruiser has arrived at the colony over there. Have you arrived there?" Chen Ming immediately pulled his attention away from the blueprint and looked out the porthole. The seemingly desolate satellite and the cold planet covered with ice and snow below formed a sharp contrast. The automatic driving has brought him to the destination. The speed of the hyperspace channel is quite guaranteed within the range of the star zone. Chen Ming actually spent only a short time on the blueprint. But in just a short while, Chen Ming gained more from industrial design than from his self-study in the past week. Of course, this feeling is based on the knowledge he had learned before. Without a foundation, you may not even understand it, let alone gain knowledge from the blueprint. Chen Ming shook his head, temporarily put aside all the knowledge points about blueprint design in his mind, and replied to Song Pu, "I'm here, just looking at the engineer's blueprint and preparing to enter the port." "Okay, can we start after entering the port?" "Anytime." Chen Ming temporarily put down the blueprint, stretched his muscles and bones that were a little stiff in the simulation, and stood up to get started. Anyway, the blueprint is in hand, so it doesn't matter if we study it for a while. After Chen Ming stood up, he turned his head and looked at Cheng Xinghai, who was sitting in a wheelchair not far from him, holding an ordinary terminal monitored by Chen Ming and watching TV programs, and looked extremely bored. He said, "We should leave." Cheng Xinghai immediately threw the terminal away and said to Chen Ming excitedly, "Are we finally leaving? Where are we going?" "To a planet." "You said it as if you didn't say it." "Guess why I said it as if I didn't say it?" "So boring. You have said this many times when I was watching something just now." The spacecraft quickly landed in a space station in the satellite's orbit around the star. Although Chen Ming came to an industrial colony this time, he still had to go to the local warehouse as soon as he arrived here. And this time, Chen Ming brought Cheng Xinghai with him. That is, he asked her to wear a protective suit that wrapped herself tightly, and a set of walking assisting exoskeleton made by Chen Ming for the disabled. At least Cheng Xinghai could walk normally, so that Chen Ming would not have to push the wheelchair to walk, eliminating the possibility of exposing her identity from this aspect. This was also a must-do for Chen Ming to bring Cheng Xinghai out. Cheng Xinghai had no objection. As long as she didn't stay in the cell, everything would be fine. Because the space station where Chen Ming landed was responsible for the colony's external material transportation mission, most of the things that needed to be transported to other places would be piled up in this space station. So Chen Ming first walked around the space station and then went to the space elevator that connected the space station to the ground. Go to the place where he really wanted to do business. During the gradual descent of the space elevator, when the colony appeared in Chen Ming's field of vision, the first thing he could see was the Earth core furnace energy tower standing on the flatland in the dark universe. Chen Ming had seen this thing before, just over at the Yuhui colony. It can provide a steady stream of energy for the entire colony. And below this Earth core furnace energy tower is a cluster of spacecraft hull manufacturing factories belonging to heavy industry, illuminated by various heat sources. The factory was constantly emitting dark smoke, which rose straight up into the sky on this planet without an atmosphere, forming a huge column of smoke. At the end of the cooling cycle of the heat cycle of the Earth core furnace energy tower, the thick smoke could even hide the tower for a moment. Even without air, the high heat of the factory below, and the orange-red optical fiber with heat emitted by the Earth core furnace tower itself when converting geothermal energy seemed to be able to be transmitted to Chen Ming through the vacuum and protective clothing. This is a complete industrial colony. The warehouses used to store materials and products for internal digestion and temporarily store materials before being transported to other areas through the space station are mainly concentrated near the furnace tower. The Earth core furnace energy tower is the core of this industrial colony. Starting from its feet, there are a total of 4 logistics channels extending outward in the southeast, northwest, and northeast directions of the planet's magnetic poles. Finally, the logistics transportation area outside the colony is unified and directly transported to the warehouse of the space station through the space elevator, or directly transported to other locations on the planet by spacecraft. After all, there are still some supporting resources on the planet that can be developed. Chen Ming was observing the layout of the entire colony on the space elevator while thinking about the effect that the blueprint drawn by Hong Guanghong should have after it was realized. At the same time, he followed the guide arranged by Song Pu and took the freight train on the transportation line in the south of the industrial colony in the 4 directions of southeast, northwest, and northeast, and arrived in the industrial zone. As Chen Ming got closer to the core of the industrial zone, his attention was more and more attracted by the power tower. The sense of technology and a special sense of power on this tower really made him unable to stop. Unfortunately, he could not control this thing in the simulation now. The volume of this thing deep underground and the mental consumption brought by its technical level were not what he could bear alone now. Chen Ming could only be forced to retract his gaze and followed the guide all the way to the warehouse under the Earth's core furnace power tower. And these warehouses filled with various industrial products and various raw materials transported were controlled. Several warehouses were specially marked and filled with materials that Song Pu urgently called from other industrial tasks. The expansion of the colony is the first priority, and everything else can be put back a little later. What Chen Ming needs to do next is to transform these materials into new buildings for the colony. And the way his psychic powers are used on the colonies is also very simple. It is necessary to control the industrial buildings of the colony in the marginal parts, and it is enough to start renovation and expansion from these buildings. That means he only needs to walk around the edge to complete the first step before the expansion officially begins. However, Chen Ming did not do this for the final effect, and chose to visit every factory in the colony. Although the accompanying personnel dissuaded him, saying that the interior of the industrial colony was very dangerous, and most of them were pure mechanical equipment and robots working in it. The only people left inside the factory were supervisors who had signed a costly death compensation contract, and a small number of engineers who could control robots to perform maintenance on these industrial equipment. However, Chen Ming didn't listen. He still made the power armor on his own and walked into the area of the factory outside the factory's logistics and transportation channels. Cheng Xinghai originally wanted to be left here by Chen Ming. After all, she was wearing the protective clothing and exoskeleton he made to assist walking, so she wouldn't have any thoughts if she stayed here alone with others. However, Cheng Xinghai finally followed him with the excuse that it was boring to stay there. Chen Ming didn't bother to stop her. Anyway, Chen Ming could control all her situations in real time, so he wouldn't be killed by a sneak attack in a dangerous situation. Walking among factories, Chen Ming could see various robots and various small logistics transportation vehicles traveling through the few aisles, providing various factories with small amounts of materials. Of course, the main means of material transportation in these factories still relies on the logistics transportation lines connecting different factories, but these lines are generally underground and cannot be seen from the ground. At the bottom of these industrial buildings, Chen Ming occasionally saw some solid small houses appearing here. Those are where the few people who work in these extremely dangerous conditions live. As Chen Ming passed by, several surveillance cameras turned to him. He didn't care and continued to walk between different industrial buildings and touch them. During this process, there was the sound of metal friction and the roar of industrial equipment. After actually stepping into the factory area, even the power armor felt unstoppable heat, which made Chen Ming slightly excited. This crystallization of human industry is full of the product of the combination of power and technology, while the source of danger that humans must live with in order to develop is constantly pumping his adrenaline. Even if this is just a simulation, Chen Ming can't help but start imagining it in his mind. Imagine what the industrial facilities would look like in his future colony, a colony completely devoid of human presence except for him. It should be very different from here. Of course, Chen Ming did not forget about business. After relying on the high mobility provided by the power armor to quickly fully control all industrial equipment, Chen Ming returned to the train in the logistics channel and headed outside the colony with others. At this time, he took out the special terminal and said to Song Pu, "I'm ready, let's make some preparations in advance." Song Pu asked with some confusion, "What do you want to prepare?" "Repair the industrial equipment. I see that there seems to be some problems with the operation of the equipment in many places. I feel that there should be a problem with the output of the entire colony. For example, can the crew's hull be produced 5 units a day? Is it okay if the efficiency of the new equipment I created is not the same as that of the old equipment?" Professional Hong Guanghong immediately said in the terminal, "I estimate that your current colony can produce about 2 cruiser hulls a day. Small ship factories such as Expulsion and Escort are okay, and the efficiency is about 67% of the new factory. Mainly because this colony took a long time to build, and it is all large-scale industrial equipment. The cost of complete replacement is too high. As long as it is not completely broken, we can continue to use it." Song Pu followed Hong Guanghong and said, "Can your mental strength be able to withstand the maintenance and expansion?" Chen Ming personally walked through the entire colony's factories and was very confident in his own mental strength. He replied, "Don't worry, there is no problem with your mental strength. I care more about the people in the colony. Everything has been explained, and they will wear protective clothing when you do things. The sealing process has been completed. Everyone working in the colony has signed a 1-month closed overtime agreement. There will be no reason to leave for at least 1 month. Information control is a little more troublesome, but it can be done, and you have your spiritual power as a final guarantee. You don't have to worry about the expansion of industrial facilities being exposed too early." Chen Ming replied again, "Understood, then I'll start from here." After he finished speaking, he put down the terminal, and the repair power instantly affected the entire colony. A large amount of metallic liquid overflowed from the core warehouse area, covering the ground of the entire colony like a flood of metal. The industrial colony also began to use the radio to repeatedly broadcast a message. All staff should wear protective clothing and protective equipment according to the advance rehearsal. There is no need to pay attention to any abnormal phenomena. the situation will be over. If there is an unexpected situation, please contact the department head immediately. As the broadcast was repeated, the metal liquid that had submerged the entire colony in the flood changed again. They flowed along the industrial buildings, gradually from the bottom to the top of the buildings. All industrial buildings and industrial facilities were wrapped in these backflowing metal liquids at the moment of operation, and these metal liquids did not affect the work of these industrial facilities themselves. This process lasted about 5 minutes. These metal liquids were either completely integrated into the industrial facilities or all retreated back to the warehouse. As the metal liquid disappeared, a new industrial colony that seemed to have just been built appeared in front of everyone. Songpu immediately asked Chen Ming with concern, "How is the mental power consumption? Do you need to rest for a while?" "No, it's just maintenance, and the next is the highlight." Chen Ming just finished speaking. The metal liquid gushed out in the colony again. This time it was not just a metal flood like before. Instead, it was a metal tsunami that completely submerged the entire colony, gushing directly from the underground near the Earth core furnace power tower. Like a metal volcano erupting, the metal liquid that submerged the entire colony gradually rushed to the edge of the colony area. Part of them seeped into the ground, and part of them took shape on the ground. Walls of steel rose outside the old colony, and metal towers were built inside the new colony. Industrial facilities emerged from the metal liquid. Countless industrial robots were connected to the colony's industrial network the moment they were created by Chen Ming, and the industrial facilities were started, and they began to operate at the highest efficiency at the first time. The area of the entire industrial colony can be said to have more than doubled on the basis of the original colony. And the work efficiency of the entire colony, even if it is just seen with the naked eye, rather than after precise measurement, is at least more than 1.5 times. The expansion of area and the increase in industrial efficiency are not a one-to-one relationship. With the expansion of area, and some of the original design defects being repaired in this expansion, the improvement in efficiency is far more than imagined. Even if this is not Chen Ming's psychic power really acting on the real industrial colony. But the effect presented by the simulated colony is enough to show the power of Chen Ming's psychic power. This colony that sprang up in just a few minutes made Chen Xinghai, who had been following Chen Ming, look at Chen Ming with a little shock. Although she didn't know much about Chen Ming, she was sure that Chen Ming must have done something similar before, otherwise Bai Quan would not let him do something similar in the simulation. Just think about the results Bai Quan had achieved in the 14th Legion. Chen Xinghai had no doubt that the giant dock belonging to Yu Hui became Chen Ming's thing in this metal wave. Of course, Chen Ming was not so excessive in fact. Most of the giant dock was still under Yu Hui's control. In fact, it was still relying on the spread of psychic energy and the infiltration of a large number of Yu Hui individuals that allowed Chen Ming to achieve the final goal. However, Chen Xinghai didn't know this. She only knew that Chen Ming's psychic energy seemed to be at a different level of development than hers. The possibility of defeating Chen Ming in her heart was reduced again, but her competitive spirit did not diminish at all. If she could beat Chen Ming in the simulation, that would be a truly hearty and happy thing for her. Of course, forget about this simulation and talk about it next time. At this time, Songpu, who was watching the live broadcast, had a brain freeze when he saw the new Steel City appear. If the next dozen colonies can have such a large-scale expansion and such a large-scale increase in productivity, even if the front line is still at a disadvantage, he has the possibility of crushing the government army head-on with his troops. Thinking of this, Songpu looked at Chen Ming's figure in the live broadcast video with a hint of heat in his eyes. Just when Chen Ming's psychic power covered the entire industrial zone and expanded an entire industrial colony. As a referee, Bai Quan looked at this scene and felt a little emotional, feeling the rapid progress of Chen Ming's psychic power. Bai Quan really had a thorough understanding of Chen Ming's life. Especially the period from ordinary people to psychics, he had a detailed and in-depth understanding. From the beginning of the mining space station to Ruemu, and then to the pirate space station, the speed of Chen Ming's psychic power progress in the whole process was completely slow compared to now. Until Wen discovered Chen Ming's seedling and began to cultivate him, Chen Ming's psychic power strength and mental power increased all the way. Especially the last time he performed in Yu Hui, he was able to successfully destroy Yu Hui's new battleship. At that time, Chen Ming could already make a lot of noise. So now, when Bai Quan saw Chen Ming completing the expansion of the colony in the simulation, he had no doubt that Chen Ming could really do these things in reality. Moreover, the realization of various psychic attributes of deep simulation is not something that can be done in a snap. Instead, it relies on the settings input before the simulation begins. After the computer logic calculation of the simulation equipment, it calculates the effect of the set conditions in the final simulation. This should be the closest to reality. Except that the total amount of Chen Ming's mental power cannot be determined. All performances should be no different from what Chen Ming can do in reality. As for whether Chen Ming's mental power is sufficient, after the giant dock incident, Bai Quan gave Chen Ming a second spiritual awakening nerve, and his mental power is definitely higher than that of the dock. And the last time Hui used the volcano to try to assassinate Chen Ming completely protected the dome in the ghost place of their 14th Legion branch. He even used the effect of the purgatory core to directly solidify the entire vertical volcano. Bai Quan specially asked someone to translate Chen Ming's paper on the purgatory core and roughly understood the mechanism of the purgatory core. This purgatory core is just a tool, and it has more of a converter effect. If a psychic can directly use the purgatory core to suppress a volcano, it at least means that the psychic power of the psychic is strong enough to affect the volcano. Therefore, even if Chen Ming achieved a psychic effect of this scale, Bai Quan did not raise any objections. He believed that Chen Ming could do it. At this moment, Bai Quan suddenly received an external signal. Someone from the headquarters logged into the simulation device and was applying to watch the game. Identity authentication. It was Song Pu's mentor Pang Dong and Dong Miao's mentor Shi Han, both of whom were major generals. Of course, this does not mean that every student has a major general as a mentor, but only excellent people can have excellent graduation mentors. It is normal for mentors to care about students. The use rights of the simulation equipment itself are not only in Bai Quan's hands. It's just that the referee authority of this simulation is in Bai Quan's hands, so watching the game requires Bai Quan's permission. And unlike the referee authority, which can gain insight into the entire battlefield situation, the perspective of the spectator authority is limited to the vicinity of all people in the simulation and cannot understand a broader situation. So Bai Quan directly opened the permissions to the two instructors and pulled them into the communication channel. By the way, he kicked out his psychic friend who was always talking nonsense to prevent him from clashing with others later. After Song Pu's instructor Pang Dong accessed the spectator system and joined the communication channel, he immediately asked Bai Quan, who was already in the channel, "Lieutenant General Bai, how is the situation? I just heard that the simulation started and came here. How long has it been now?" Bai Quan did not hide anything and summarized the current situation. It has only been 1 day in the simulation. Song Pu's side currently has a big advantage. 1 day has an advantage? Yes, at the beginning of the game, his teammates found an opportunity and captured one of the opponents. Sure, I have seen the list of personnel. The only one who can capture the opponent at the beginning should be Chen Ming, right? Pang Dong knew the background of the simulation, and he also knew that both sides would have one person very close to each other at the beginning. But his own students were still clear and unlikely to take the risk of one-for-one exchange. It seems that the other few people have not done similar things, so Chen Ming should be the only one who can do this. Bai Quan answered as expected, "Yes, it's him." Who did he capture? Cheng Xinghai. Ah. Pang Dong felt something was wrong and avoided the topic and asked, "Are we the only ones watching the game now? I heard that Lieutenant General Bai will send the results of this simulation to their respective schools. Our students can't sit still. You told us about this in advance. Others should come as well, right?" Dong Miao's mentor Shi Han said, "We came as soon as we received the news. It's normal that others haven't come yet. Maybe they will come in a while." As soon as Shi Han finished speaking, Bai Quan received another signal for applying to watch the game. When he saw the applicant's identity information, he frowned slightly, but did not make any other moves. He just said in the communication channel of watching the game, "Someone came as soon as I said that." It was Lu Wei, the mentor of Dijia on the opposite side. Pang Dong suddenly felt that something was going to happen next and confirmed, Lu Wei? Well, that's him. I let him in. As soon as Lu Wei entered the channel, he asked the same question as Pang Dong. How is the situation? Bai Quan said nothing, but Pang Dong spoke on behalf of Bai Quan. Your side is temporarily at a disadvantage. Disadvantage? How long has it been? 1 day. You're at a disadvantage in just 1 day? Is it true? Really, you'll know just by looking at it. After a moment of silence, Lu Wei said in a strange tone, on the first day, 4 against 5. How did you do it with such a disadvantage? Lu Wei's words were not directed at his own students. Several people present could hear that these words were used to question Bai Quan. The implication contained in it was that he suspected Bai Quan of arranging for Chen Xinghai to kill someone intentionally. Bai Quan first conveniently rejected his psychic friend's request to join the communication channel after he found out that he had been kicked out, and Lu Wei also joined the communication channel. Then he said to Lu Wei, see for yourself? Lu Wei's tone suddenly had a hint of anger, and he said, there should be everyone's perspective video of the past day, right? I want to take a closer look at what is the disadvantage. Please send it to me by middle will. When the smell of gunpowder suddenly started to get stronger in Bai Quan, Song Pu finally finished lamenting the power of Chen Ming's spiritual energy, contacted Chen Ming and asked, how is the consumption of spiritual power? Still calculating. Chen Ming replied quickly and continued to calculate the more detailed mental loss in his mind. The workload of this industrial colony is quite large. So when the expansion was just in progress, Chen Ming had already started to follow the scale of the expansion and the upper limit of his own mental power, plus various biological and dead objects he owned that could help him restore his mental power, as well as the resources provided by the hive mind. Blessing calculated an approximate loss. Then Chen Ming's body was tested in real life using an approximate physical object of the same proportion. By simply converting it, he could get a basically accurate final amount of mental power consumption. The result was unexpectedly low. Although Chen Ming was purely following the drawings, he basically only needed to continuously extend and transform the original industrial building, and he didn't even need to manufacture anything more. Moreover, the technological level of this colonial industrial facility that produces ship hulls and hull parts is not too high compared to other factories that produce high-precision chips. But Chen Ming always felt that the acceleration of his thinking would have some positive effects when he used psychic powers. The acceleration of thinking seems to have also strengthened the intensity of Chen Ming's consciousness, and the intensity of consciousness has also increased the intensity of Chen Ming's mental power. This was a rather strange discovery. Chen Ming felt that he would have to look for an opportunity to use simulation equipment to dive deep into his consciousness and test it specifically. But at least one thing is certain now, that is, the expansion of this colony has not completely exhausted his mental energy. And judging from Chen Ming's calculation of his mental power recovery rate, he can fully recover his mental power in a few hours at most and start the next work. So Chen Ming quickly said to Song Pu on the terminal, I have already made the calculations here, and I can go directly to the next place. Are you in good condition? The amount of mental energy consumed is about 80%. If you fly slowly on the road, you should be able to recover almost enough to support the next time. Then there is the logistics warehouse again. I can recover for a while at that time and can set off. Song Pu was even more excited when he heard Chen Ming's answer and said, okay, if you continue to follow this efficiency, you may be closer to the front line in 2 days. When the time comes, remember to tell me or the general in advance to avoid being involved in any battle. Chen Ming asked with some confusion, is there going to be a war so soon? That's not true. It's not necessarily true. I'm just reminding you first. Because I feel that it is better for you to sit at the rear as much as possible. It would not be a good thing to be involved in the battle on the front line. The main thing is that your psychic power doesn't limit your location when you use it, so it doesn't matter where you are, right? Chen Ming did not deny this and said, this is the truth. But many times he still prefers to follow the fleet himself. This is a habit left over from when he didn't control many spaceships. And now Chen Ming has a cruiser and a jump engine that can jump multiple times in a short period of time. Even if he ran with the fleet, there was almost no possibility of being caught. The only time they were almost caught was when the machine tribe took advantage of Chen Ming's attack on their colony and used the colony as bait to set up a device to block the entire galaxy. But since he ran away at that time, among other things, he is quite skilled at running away now. But now they were engaging in a team-based battle in a simulation device. Chen Ming didn't mind a bit of a team and said, "Then I'll pay attention. Once I control the colonies and warehouses on the front line, I'll go directly to find a place where no one knows. Place to squat. That's fine. If you have a terminal, you can contact us at any time. You have the ability to jump multiple times. You can run around the entire star zone with you. If something happens, you can be there at the first time. That's it. Remember to tell me when you get there next time." Okay. After Chen Ming and Song Pu finished communicating, a day passed in a blink of an eye. Song Pu, who was at the rebel headquarters, ended his communication with Chen Ming again. He just learned that Chen Ming had arrived at the 4th industrial colony and would start the 4th expansion immediately. And this was because Chen Ming had taken a slightly longer break after the expansion of the 3rd colony, which led to the 4th expansion starting now. This efficiency has once again exceeded Song Pu's expectations. It's only been a little over a day, and 3 colonies have been completed, and the 4th colony is about to be completely controlled and expanded by Chen Ming. This means that it will take at most 2 or 3 days for Chen Ming to complete the total of 11 industrial colonies in the star zone they actually control. This efficiency is really amazing. And the same is true for Hong. In order to keep up with Chen Ming's efficiency, he had no time to relax. He had been preparing the blueprint for the industrial colony for more than 30 hours. Although he could not sleep in this deep simulation because of the accelerated consciousness, it was still necessary to take some rest. Hong was also working hard in this situation. Since others were working, Song Pu naturally had to work. As a person responsible for the dispatch of the battlefield and the overall situation, he had to grasp the overall situation. The overall situation included not only the rebels themselves, but also the opponents. Although every team member is important in the team-based simulation battle, it does not mean that one person cannot continue. Even if the opponent has been at a disadvantage because of Cheng Xinghai's capture, they will definitely not give up and must be looking for some kind of opportunity. Therefore, Song Pu has also been increasing his investigation of the government forces recently. After signing a document, Song Pu said to the secretary who had just come in and was waiting on the side, "How is that matter going?" "It's going smoothly. There are people in the government army who sympathize with us. After helping us develop some informants, he has successfully infiltrated the giant dock. 3 people have been turned in the department responsible for the maintenance of the giant dock, one of whom is a member of the department's management. If nothing unexpected happens, this department will continue to be responsible for the maintenance of the battleship after the maintenance of the giant dock is completed. It is expected that we will be able to get involved in the core work and destroy the giant dock within a week." Song Pu nodded with satisfaction and said, "Well, let them continue to do this. If there is any news, notify me as soon as possible. If the government army wants to find a way to deal with us, repairing the giant dock and pulling out the battleship parked there is the most convenient means. We must never let them do this." The secretary silently wrote down Song Pu's words. Song Pu paused for a moment and continued to ask, "Is there any movement from the government army in other aspects?" The secretary replied, "After signing the armistice agreement, the government army's armed forces have gradually moved to the edge of Gallo, 3 in accordance with the agreement, and there seems to be a sign of organizing negotiations. But there is one thing that is strange. Their propaganda has not stopped recently. Instead, they want to put pressure on us in public opinion. 2 things have obviously begun to ferment." "Which 2? The secretary glanced at Song Pu and said cautiously, "It's about the accidental injury of civilians in our headquarters." Song Pu's expression did not change much, and he said simply, "This is easy to solve. Just publicly state that there is an unknown failure in the communication system and hint at the espionage behavior of the government army. I have asked the relevant departments to do a good job of the aftermath. Compensation for the dead and injured has been given and has been forgiven by the families." When the secretary was about to contact people on the terminal, Song Pu waved his hand again to stop him and said, "Wait a minute. Don't rush to respond with our own propaganda. First, use the newspapers on the government side to record our post-processing and publish it. Don't give it too much publicity, just let this news sink in. When public opinion really ferments, you can use our propaganda outlets to start propaganda. The more the government army ferments at this time, the more bitter fruits it will have to eat at that time. We should have people in this area on the government side, right? The secretary immediately nodded and said, "Yes, I will do it later." "Okay, what about the other thing?" The secretary glanced at the file in his hand and said, "It's about the gentleman who came to you 2 days ago." Song Pu turned his head to look at the secretary and asked, "Chen Ming? It's not about him on the government side, right?" "Yes." The other side said that the spies we sent out carried out terrorist attacks at civilian aerospace airports, resulting in significant property losses. "Does the government army have a video?" "Yes." The secretary immediately handed the terminal to Song Pu, and a news video was playing on it. However, the content of the video can be said to be quite blurry. There are only some fierce explosion shots and videos of post-disaster reconstruction of the civilian aerospace airport after the incident and cleaning up the wreckage and ruins. Chen Ming's identity as a psyker was not revealed. After reading it, the waves in Song Pu's heart were completely smoothed away, and he said, "It's okay. This matter is easy to handle. I'll show you a document and you will know." Song Pu happened to have a video file in his hand that Chen Ming had handed to him when he came over. It was recorded by Chen Ming himself from multiple perspectives, recording what he did at the Sky Airport. Anyway, at least Chen Ming did not take the initiative to attack civilians. It was even the government forces who took the initiative to attack him in the beginning. In addition, there are clips of police robots killing each other in the video. With a little editing, it is a piece of evidence that can turn what the government forces did into an ugly act that they directed and performed themselves. After giving the video to his secretary, Song Pu asked him again, "Is there anything else?" "There is nothing important for now. I have sorted out the rest of the files that you may need to see and sent them to your computer." "Yes, then you go to your own thing." "Yes." After the secretary left, Song Pu was the only one left in the office. He leaned back on his seat, and images of recent actions by government forces flashed through his mind. To be honest, he felt that the government forces frequently use some nasty tricks. Although these methods seemed to be fine, they were very easy to be countered and should not be used so casually. Instead, release it at a better time, such as when they start fighting again. Then he might not have the energy to take care of these things. As a precaution, the government forces should not say that they did these things because of Cheng Xinghai's disappearance. "I need to observe more. Maybe there is some special arrangement." Song Pu breathed out. Suddenly he stood up and walked out of the office, ready to go outside to get some fresh air. This is the downside of simulating too much detail on these things. Although there is no need for sleep, the mental pressure caused by long hours of work is real, and it is easy to cause accidents if it is not relieved a little. Just when Song Pu left the office and went to the corridor to light a cigarette for himself, there were two young officers holding paper documents in their arms, talking on the other side of the corridor. Neither of them saw Song Pu coming out of the office. Just as Song Pu took a puff of his cigarette, he heard one of them say, "Our recent movements seem to be increasing our preparations for war. Didn't we sign an armistice agreement with the government troops?" Another person immediately said, "Because the government troops did not retreat at all. Instead, they stopped at the border of Gallo 3 and did not withdraw to Gallo 1 and Gallo 2. What do you mean by the government troops? But will the government forces really violate the armistice agreement?" Song Pu went over and patted the shoulder of the person who first asked the question. After the young officer turned his head, a somewhat frightened look appeared on his face. Song Pu said to him calmly, "The armistice agreement is meant to be torn up. Don't forget what the government originally looked like. We must be prepared to fight with force until higher levels intervene. Never trust your enemies." Song Pu returned to his office soon after. Cheng Xinghe contacted him at this moment and said, "I am already preparing to set up a trap and arrange to pick up the person. When picking up the person, I will use the identified spy to transmit the information to the other side in a reasonable way. There should be action." "Understood." Chen Ming should also be near your place at about the same time. If you need support, let him know. Don't feel embarrassed. Chang Xinghe said decisively. I know. I can understand the priorities of things. But it depends on whether the opponent is trapping him or not. If not, there is nothing I can do. Song Pu didn't finish what Chang Xinghe said and followed him and said, well, anyway, this is just a random attempt. I never thought that Chen Ming could catch Chang Xinghe from the beginning. It doesn't matter even if the opponent doesn't come. Just use it as a warm-up exercise. Speaking of which, how is the quality of your soldiers there? Only part of the rebels are converted from the regular army, and many are new recruits. I am more worried about the source of soldiers and the number of soldiers. I feel okay. Chang Xinghe spoke without any worry in his tone. Now the rebels are basically veterans leading new recruits. After fighting a few battles and losing some people, the new recruits basically become veterans. If you continue this mode, although the overall combat power will be weaker than that of pure veterans, the benefits of doing so are also obvious. It can quickly transform new recruits into combat effectiveness, and the overall loss will not be too great if the veterans are with them. As long as it's okay with you. After contacting Chang Xinghe, Song Pu turned around and contacted Hong Guanghong and asked, how is the progress over there? Hong Guanghong responded after a while, it's okay. The subsequent colonies are much easier to build than the main business of ship hull manufacturing at the beginning. The only ones left are manufacturing chips and high-precision equipment. The colonies are more troublesome, but that's about it. As long as I produce results, I will contact Chen Ming as soon as possible. But now, his mental recovery speed can't keep up with the speed at which I can produce blueprints. Song Pu nodded again with satisfaction and said, the fact that Chen Ming's expansion of the colony can be compared to your drawing speed is outrageous enough. After continuing to explain some things to Hong Guanghong, Song Pu looked at the time and continued to devote himself to his own work.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.